A former president of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, has said that the battle against corruption can only be effective and successful if it begins with accountability among top government officials. The former president said that tackling corruption at the highest levels of leadership would set an example for others and demonstrate the government's commitment to transparency and integrity. He spoke on this last night during an interactive session in Abeokuta, the Ogun State chapter. The conversation focused on Obasanjo's legacies in government and his assessment of today's Nigeria. Chief Olusegun Obasanjo described corruption as hydra-headed and that one that has eaten deep into the fabric of Nigerian society, emphasizing that the fight against corruption must start with leadership for it to succeed. And to discuss this, we're joined by public affairs analyst Dr. Sam Amadi. Dr. Sam, many thanks for joining us today. Let's start with just the implications of the former president's statement that the fight against corruption must start with leadership for it to succeed. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's a truism that leadership is critical. Everything is of force and leadership, but it's more so in countries that are culturally hierarchical. Scholars argue that changes in such countries should be based on top-down instead of bottom-up. For the simple reason that those countries lack they're hierarchical, and so they expect change from bottom-up, but rather change from up-down. So that's really the way to look at it, that change must come from top-down, not necessarily bottom-up. That's the point. Again, in our own example, we've seen that leaders are models, the signal to everybody what the system can tolerate and permit. So in spite of laws against corruption and rhetoric against corruption, when we see leaders signal to followers, citizens, that certain conducts can be rewarded or punished, then they incentivize those behaviors. It's more than rhetoric. So like a famous politician says, what you do speaks louder than what you say. I can hear you. What leadership does in terms of who they reward, in terms of what conducts they signal to citizens that are rewardable. For example, if you have politicians who are corrupt, manifestly and obviously so in high offices, it's a waste of time telling young ones to shun the way of corruption. I hear EFCC always, talking to young people, youths, to tell them the way of crime is not rewarding. But if everyday criminals happen to access the highest offices in the land or get to have public approval, receive national awards, models as governors or as senators or as president or anything, then the idea that crime does not pay, it doesn't make sense. So it's always about leadership. First, signaling what society stands for, developing a vision of a transparent, virtuous, progressive, development-minded state, and aligning behavior, public behavior, and setting incentives to motivate, encourage, and disincentivize certain behavior. So that leadership failure is critical to the failure of anti-corruption. So President Obasanjo is right. The question is, has he done that himself? He was president. What kind of signaling did he give for the 8 years he was president? What kind of Nigerians did he promote in public office? Who did he use his opportunities to bring to public service? So even if he has done all this rightly, today perhaps we will not be one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And by the way, under his watch, Nigeria was also rated poorly in transparency and in anti-corruption by the world body.
All right. Okay, so let's move on to, you just talked about President Obasanjo's leadership and also this very indicting on him as well, because Nigeria rated low in the corruption index as well. But the larger picture here is about Nigeria's leadership and how can they really ensure the fight against corruption consistently and as a daily affair, as emphasized by the former president.
Well, I think the key thing to bear in mind is many countries have gone through this way. We've seen that with Singapore. We've seen significant improvement in the Scandinavian countries. What is key? 3 factors are important. One is a legal system that rewards merit-based, that rewards honest actions and punishes dishonest actions. So if your legal system is set up in a manner that punishes, rewards first excellence and promotes excellence, because the antidote to corruption in public service is partly excellence, merit-based reward system. That helps. Two, you need to have structural changes that emphasize discretion and the idea of kingship. So people in authority, level of accountability should be taken for granted. In Nigeria, in spite of our pursuit of democratic accountability, the overriding norm is that norm of deference to KBC, the KBC mentality. You know, people used to call Obasanjo Baba, and the president is seen as somebody who cannot be questioned. When I was chief executive of NEC, and they tell me the president says this, and if it's not right, I said, no, Mr. President, we can't do this. And the president accepts it. So if you need to create a process in which leaders are taken as not gods, and therefore citizens and those who work with them can control, limit their discretion. And so the law must be set in a way that's real accountability and not based on personalized rule, whether at the level of president or governors. Today, the governors govern their states as, you know, it's just like there's no difference between private and public. The governor's wives can have a project and the money is taken from there. The governor can give anybody, pay 100 million, governors give 20 million to actors to launch their magazines without appropriation. So this notion of personalized rule is actually why many of the African countries score very low in anti-corruption, because the starting point for anti-corruption is the assumption that there's a clear difference between private and public. And therefore, a leader who supervises the public wealth or public opportunities, who knows that they are distinct from his own personal possessions, and there's no commingling. But in our jurisdiction, in our cultural societies, we have this tendency that the man who supervises partly owns what he supervises. So we need to knock off that cultural exceptionalism that, you know, part of being Africa is to respect and deify those in authority, is to allow them to control what they're supposed to supervise or manage as if it belongs to them, and to always give them a pass from criticism and from being asked to account for what they use their resources for. We see that also with our churches, where the general overseers, you know, the way they are controlled outside this country, so the way they control inside. So elsewhere, there will be accountability, members demand accountability. Here, members don't demand accountability. So there's a cultural component that needs to be dismantled to create a true democratic society based on democratic accountability. And that is driven by egalitarianism, the fact that those in authority and those that govern are equal in every way. And therefore, they have to exercise those power under very controlled circumstances. Those are some of the critical things that have to be done to ensure that leadership itself, you know, begins to signal to us this new awakening about corruption, about a life of probity and accountability. And openness is important. We need to see through. You know, we have the Freedom of Information Act, but the agencies do not do the mandatory disclosures. You need to have a society where there are automatic disclosures. People know what's going on. People know how much the National Assembly spends. Every day we quarrel about whether they are the most expensive legislature or not. But it's a simple thing. Upload all expenditures. Those that are private, those are institutional. So when you have a society that's based on automatic disclosure of public information, then you create a social mechanism for accountability and for less corruption. Because corruption thrives in secrecy, in darkness. Once you bring much of activity to the public light, then you control corruption.
Well, I mean, we have to also talk about the agencies. Hopefully, I wish we did have enough time about the Nigerian institutions who are supposed to be tackling the corruption effectively. It's very indicting on them that the heads of those agencies, especially the EFCC, oftentimes have been found also wanting of the same crimes they are persecuting others for. But Dr. Sam Amadi, many thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate you for coming on and having this discussion with us this morning, or rather this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.